I think for a long time, I just felt like I was on a hamster wheel and just so busy, you don't really stop and think about what you've done to get there. You just keep going. You just keep doing it. You keep practicing. You keep learning songs, and you don't really, at least me, take the time to realize, wow, I did that, you know.
This is Live at the Hall from the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. This week, the museum's Nashville Cats interview series explores the career of Grammy-winning steel guitarist Cindy Cashdollar.
Thank you.
You know, I want to go back and start with your family history. You know, one, we need people to know that the Cashdollar name is a family name.
I did not make it up.
and it goes back for not just generations, but really centuries in Woodstock, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so your family was, you know, we have, I think, some photos of some of your family members who were in. I thought maybe we'd talk a little bit about, that's your great-grandmother.
Oh yeah, Sarah Cashdollar was quite a character. She did so much. She ran a boarding house in Woodstock. She opened a restaurant to feed a lot of the artists that had moved to Woodstock. It was very well known as an artist community long ago. And she also brought the first, opened and operated the first switchboard in Woodstock.
Yeah, that's great. For a woman in the 1940s, or early 1900s, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And your grandfather?
My grandfather, Everett, there with the milk pail. Yes, my family had a dairy, Locust Grove Dairy, and so it was a family-run business. My dad delivered milk, and my grandmother, who I just could not, Walina, I could not find a good picture of her. Anyway, she ran a boarding house, so that was a self-sufficient operation there.
So you just drank a lot of fresh milk?
I don't like milk.
Oh, you don't like that, honey?
Never did, never will.
That's funny. And your father continued sort of with the business?
Yes, my father, Roger, here with the milk truck, such a great truck. So eventually they did sell the business to another dairy, and eventually everything, you know, it's hard to be a farmer now, but it was also difficult back then. So eventually I think it was the mid-'60s, I think the end of the dairy business happened for us, for my family.
So you were in Woodstock before it was before everybody knew
Before it was
the
Woodstock.
town. Knew that name for a different
Yeah.
reason. So, how did that change the feeling of Woodstock after, even, I know the concert didn't even happen in Woodstock, it was nearby.
Right.
But how did that change? And because you were there. So,
It really did change, but Woodstock was an ever-changing community. I mean, way back in the 1800s, there were bluestone quarries and hemlock for the tanneries, so it was really a place, and it's right in the center of the Catskill Mountains. It's 2 hours north of New York City, if that's any indication. But it was always, there was tanneries, there was a glass factory, the bluestone there. Most of the sidewalks in New York City are bluestone from Woodstock. And then it became very well known as an art colony. And so a lot of artists started coming. So that was the first change. And there were festivals, little mini festivals, the Maverick festivals. Then when the Woodstock Festival happened in '69, the town realized that it couldn't hold all the people, they didn't want it, so it moved to Bethel, New York. But as a young teenager, I saw the changes because there were so many people just coming to Woodstock. There wasn't any cell phones. I mean, nobody knew what they were doing. They just landed in the town. So it was kind of fun to see everybody just, all of a sudden the town exploded. So after the festival, that's when all the shops, sprung up and tons of music clubs, and it did change. It's ever evolving, like a lot of places, like Nashville. It's really changing, I see.
and after being gone for a long time, you moved back recently, but I'm gonna save that and talk about it a little bit later. We have a couple more family photos, and then we have a shot of your mother outside of a George Strait bus, I believe. If this is right.
Yeah, both my folks were always very supportive of what I, did for a living, do for a living, wanted to do. So my mom came to visit me in Austin, Texas, and when I was with Asleep at the Wheel, we did a few of the George Strait summer tours. So that's us in the huge parking lot with all the tour buses. And
Great.
you can tell she's having a good time hanging out.
Yes. And your brother became a musician as well, Russ. So.
Yes, my brother Russ Cashdollar is a drummer, and he was touring through Austin when I was living there, and so photo op, we're brother and sister behind the Continental Club.
Was that a Wanda Jackson tour at that time, or?
I don't think he was on tour with Wanda Jackson. I think he was on tour with the Luster Kings, and then later the Luster Kings who backed Wanda Jackson.
Gotcha. Great.
Yeah.
Great. So, as far as your musical development, what was your first instrument? And when did you start? Why did you become interested in music, and what was your first instrument?
I think I liked music. My mother had a great record collection of, she loved everything. I mean, she had Dave Brubeck records, Chet Baker records, Stan Getz, like a lot of jazz. Plus, she loved what became known as world beat music. So Ravi Shankar, Olatunji, Japanese flute music. She had everything. And my dad loved country music, so I had all of those influences. So I just, I think I saw Joan Baez on TV and thought, I want to play guitar. So guitar was my first instrument, or as I call it, regular guitar, not slide guitar. So I started taking lessons when I was about 11, I think. Oh, there we are. Yeah, so that's me in the field of Locust Grove Dairy, and I used to like to practice outside. It sounded better. So my mom snuck up on me and took that picture. And that is a horrible K guitar, because it seems like everybody that starts on guitar has a horrible guitar with bad action, and that was one of them.
Yes, we have heard that story over and over. It's funny, yes. Why the resonator guitar?
I just love the sound of the resonator guitar. I think, my dad listening to country music a lot on the radio, I think probably most of what I was hearing and it was AM radio. It was probably pedal steel, but I love the sound. And then when I was waitressing in a bar, there was a bluegrass band, and I saw someone playing dobro, and I just thought it was the most incredible sound, because at the time I was playing blues guitar, kind of Merle Travis, kind of country blues kind of style, and I like country, and I thought it was a perfect sound to marry those two genres of music. So that's how I got interested. And so Ronnie Sutton was a dobro player, and I asked him, did he give lessons? No, but he gave me the name and number of his dobro teacher. And then I stopped playing guitar.
It's not an easy instrument to learn, is it?
It's not. It really isn't. It's like especially if you are used to playing guitar, so you're used to your fingers connecting to a fretboard, but playing dobro and then later steel, you're playing everything like this with a slide bar, so you have no tactile contact. And then finger picks and having to work everything together, and yeah, it's what I call the cruel mistress. That's what I call it.
Who were some of your influences?
When I started out on dobro, or resonator. Dobro is the Dopera brothers were the ones that took the patent out, invented the resonator guitar in order to make a guitar louder. So it was called a dobro, but now it's referred to as a resonator guitar. So my teacher was very into bluegrass, and one of his favorite dobro players, reso players, was Josh Graves. And so that's why I started out doing that style. Oh, and there's my teacher.
Not that he looks like a character at all. But.
He was. My teacher, Charlie Ferrara, that's us fooling around at a bluegrass festival, but he came to my house every week for a year or more, and didn't charge anything. My mom would make him a pot of coffee. He'd drink the whole thing. He'd bring all his Josh Graves records, and that's how I learned.
That's great that you do it for free, man. You were at the time that you were learning, Woodstock was really a important music town. A lot of people had moved there. A lot of good music was being created and written there. What did that influence you?
Oh, yes. I feel really fortunate to have grown up in Woodstock, because there were so many musicians living there. Before the Woodstock Festival, certainly Van Morrison lived there, Bob Dylan, then later, and the band, Levon Helm and Rick Danko, and so there was a lot of people around. And I was they used to have festivals called Sound Outs. So I was going to those long before, I guess I was about 12, 13 when I started going out to hear music. And so it was all around me, and it was a huge influence, being able to see live music at such an early age,
Nope. I know you talked about this concert. I can't remember. Was that your first concert or one that was real important to you?
Yes, that was the first live concert I ever saw. It was a benefit for a Woodstock musician, John Herald, whose home had burned down. And so my mom took me to see it because my guitar teacher, Billy Fair, was in the show. But as you can see, there was a lot of other people in there too. John Hammond Jr., Bill Keith, Jim Rooney, and Van Morrison, Happy and Artie Trum. All these people I ended up playing with. It's bizarre, years later in my life. But this concert really was I guess it was epiphany for me. I guess I was 11 or 12, just seeing or feeling the reaction between the performers and the audience. And it was really something, and seeing all those incredible people. Odetta, folk singer, was on that show too.
It's amazing that at least more than half of the list you ended up recording with or playing.
Yeah.
At least recording with, and maybe much more
I
playing
know.
and stuff.
It's very strange. And we were talking about Van Morrison earlier, but when I started touring with Van, he started asking me, he was reminiscing. He would reminisce a lot with me about Woodstock, and that was fun to talk to him about that.
Good. When did you start performing live?
My first live performance, I think, was in Florida. Right the day after I graduated high school, I moved to Fort Lauderdale with a friend. And I was just still playing guitar then, not dobro. And so I met these two fellows, Rick and Colby, and there we are. There's me and my shag haircut. But we played at a bar across from the beach called The Button, and we did happy hour. So that was my first live performance.
So you weren't of drinking age, but you were playing bars, which is
I think that was
could
drinking
in
age
Florida,
back
you could
then.
18.
Yeah,
so.
but I wasn't drinking then, so.
And then you moved back to Woodstock? Is that?
Yes, I went from Fort Lauderdale to Key West, and then moved back to Woodstock, and was waitressing to make a living, and that's where I heard the bluegrass band. Yeah. After that.
And you formed a all-female, all-woman band.
There was an all-female band formed called the Fantasy Review, and so I joined them, but I didn't like the name because I said, we sound like a bunch of strippers in Fantasy Review. So they said, well, if you can think of a better name, then go ahead. So I remembered a fiddle tune called Whiskey Before Breakfast, so the band got renamed.
Good. There they are, yeah. So, and Jennifer Condos has gone on to also have quite a illustrious career.
Yes,
so.
Jennifer, the tall, beautiful blonde, standing there, great bass player, and went on to play with so many people: Don Henley, Sheryl Crow, Stevie Nicks, just
Ray
about
LaMontagne, Jackson Brown,
yes,
Bruce Springsteen, yes,
about
great,
everybody.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Nancy Pinnock, who is seated in the car, passed away of kidney disease, and Joyce Steinloff, the drummer, passed from. She was the first recipient of a heart and liver transplant.
Oh, wow.
So she passed from that not too long ago, actually. She did good.
Yeah. So, but it was experience, right? And in bluegrass, especially at the time, an all-woman band, all-female band would have been unusual, right?
Yeah, actually, we weren't bluegrass. I'm not sure what we were. That's when I just started playing dobro. I think I knew like 3 kind of passable licks to play, and so we did a Hank Williams song. I think that was the only song I did dobro on. But the rest of it was kind of songs that they had written or cover tunes. Now, I found an old set list just last week, and Nashville Cats was on the set list.
Ah, great.
John Sebastian's song,
Yeah,
Nashville
sure.
Cats.
Yeah, that's right.
So I thought it was very appropriate to be doing the show this week here.
Yeah, that's perfect. So at some point, your skills must have developed pretty quickly, because I know you started playing with some of the biggest names in town, with Levon Helm and Rick Danko, and
yeah, there was as we were talking before, there were so many musicians in Woodstock who I would eventually meet. But I think after Whiskey Before Breakfast, in still learning how to play a resonator guitar, I think the next group after them was the John Herald Band, which was a bluegrass band, or folkgrass, as John would describe it. So I was with the John Herald Band for 5 years.
I actually first met you in 1984 because I was a newspaper reporter and came to the Nashville network because I loved the John Herald Band's The Real Thing record.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah.
And you were invited. You were playing the Ralph Emery Nashville Now show, and I was sent out or at least got my way into interviewing you guys. So we met each other in 1984 briefly. And,
wow.
And here we are again. So, talk about John. I mean, he sort of also has an interesting background. And
yeah, John Herald was very well known in a very well-known folk group or folk bluegrass group back in the early days of folk in New York City called the Greenbrier Boys, which also included Frank Wakefield and Eric Weisberg and banjo at times, and so they did an actual 50-50 combo, I would say, of folk and bluegrass, which is why John called his music folkgrass. And he was a really great singer, real high tenor voice, real strong, very good guitar picker. And so it was interesting playing with John, and that was really my first touring band as well. But it was interesting to be doing that combination of music. And I think it was really good to be going from really learning hardcore bluegrass and then branching out to playing other types of music with John on dobro.
And that, of course, any bluegrass or folk band ends up with a lot of festivals. I know this is from the Philadelphia Folk Festival, and that's quite a legendary group of people all the way across. It's Merle, as you guys can read, it's Merle Watson, Doc Watson, Tom Rush, John Hartford. Those are, so do you remember that day?
I don't remember the day, but I remember being backstage, having this photo taken, and just couldn't believe that I was standing there with legends like that, you know? That's what I remember, and I was such a huge Dr. Merle fan, and so I was just really excited at that point.
At some point, you went to work for Leon Redbone. Would that have been after John, right after John? Or?
Yeah, I think after John Herald, I played with Levon Helm and Rick Danko. They had an acoustic quartet. And as some of you may know, Levon Helm, the drummer of the band, also did some acting, and he was in his backyard practicing for a movie role with a gun. I don't know why it was loaded, but he accidentally shot himself in the leg, and so he couldn't play drums for a while. And so he and Rick formed an acoustic quartet, and so I played with them for a while. And then after that, played with Leon Redbone from '87 to '92.
Yeah, that's a long. We made like 5 or 6 or 7 records with them. I mean,
Yes.
So, yeah. So,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. Leon was a character, very brilliant man, and Jim Neighbors was a huge fan of Leon's, and so when we were touring out in Wyoming and out in that area, Jim showed up, I think 5 nights in a row. He was at our shows.
You know, and I know one of the other big Leon Redbone's fans was Johnny Carson, so he had him on.
Yes.
I was looking through clips. He had him on almost every year, a lot.
Yeah, he loved Leon.
Yeah. So, and then later Jay Leno did too. Jay Leno said his wife's favorite artist was Leon Redbone. But we have a clip from you playing with Leon, so you get a little taste of what that was like.
That was very exciting, doing the Johnny Carson show. I think we were there the last month that Johnny Carson was there.
Great. Yes. Let's watch you play, and then we can talk a little bit more about it.
General, baby, let me be your slave. Devil blows his trumpet, let me rise from my grave with some of your good jelly. Good to my worried soul. Hell, it's good to my worried soul. Let me put in my order for 2 weeks ahead. Jelly, you got Bill and my home cooked bread. Crazy about that jelly. Good to my worried soul. Hey, it's good to my worried soul. Be your slave. Gable blows the trumpet, let me rise from my grave with some of your good jelly. Good to my worried soul. Hey, good to my worried soul.
That's Leon Redbone, folks. Flip him over.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, you can clap for Leon.
Yeah, sure. You can. That's a different style of dobro playing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But as I'm sitting here looking at this clip, I'm hearing the similarity between blues and bluegrass. I mean, there really was. You know, it was just really such a cross-pollination of music. I think a lot.
And then blues was something you became interested in.
Always loved it. Yeah,
so
even when I was playing regular guitar.
Yeah, yeah.
I love blues.
Great. At some point, you took up the lap steel, right? Was that?
Yes, I took up lap steel. I think it was really just because I spoke about Levon Helm and the acoustic quartet, and Levon got recovered to play drums again and started a little group called the Woodstock All-Stars, and which had 2 drummers and electric guitars, a very loud band. And at the time, the pickups that were made for the dobro were terrible. You just couldn't get it loud enough, and if you did, it would feed back. So Levon had a very bizarre-looking slide guitar that was electric called a mellow bar. It was made really for pedal steel players, just stand up once in a while. I had 10 strings on it, and the neck was tilted up toward the player. So Levon loaned me that, and so that was my first kind of lap steel. I figured out how to take 4 strings off for there and space them so they were evenly. So I had 6 strings, because that's all I knew from dobro, and borrowed Rick Danko's amp, and it was really Levon Helm, I think, that got me playing lap steel. Just so you could hear it above the loud band that we had.
I heard a story you told of somebody, you wanted to show them the instrument, and they said, "Oh, this is great, but somebody took the strings."
Oh, yeah. It was actually not long ago, and that mellow bar still is in a guitar stand in the old green room at Levon Helm's, which is now Levon Helm's studio. You can go there still and see concerts. This photo here is of Levon and I after one of his well-known Midnight Ramble concerts in Woodstock. But anyway, that strange guitar remained in the green room with the same, it's like you could get, the strings were so rusted on there. So Jimmy Vivino, very well-known guitarist, band leader for Conan O'Brien, was at a show one time in the green room, and he picked it up. He said, "Oh my God, a mellow bar. What idiot took the strings off of here?" And I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to say a word.
Yeah.
I had just met him,
Yeah.
and I thought, he really doesn't need to know that story. So
That's good. And at what point did you leave Leon and come to Nashville, or is that?
Yeah, in late 91, early 92, Leon's work was slowing down. He was doing a lot of voiceovers, television commercials.
Elf, I guess, yes.
Yeah, Elf. Yes, I'm on the soundtrack of Elf with Leon. But he was doing a lot of TV commercial work and jingles and such, and just, I think, slowing down and touring at that point. And the club scene in Woodstock had kind of dried up. And so in order to hear of a gig that was available, who's looking for a dobro player, my husband at the time, Frank Campbell, and I decided we'd go to Nashville, that you would hear rumors first. If you're going to hear of anybody looking for anybody, it would be there. Because by the time any of that filtered to Woodstock, forget it. Gig would be gone. It was just a music town. Woodstock kind of stopped being a music town for a while, and I knew Nashville was. A very dear old friend of mine, Jim Rooney, and Pat Alger were living in Nashville, and just made sense. At the time, it made sense.
Sure. Yeah. And 91, 92 was really a boom period.
Nothing like moving to Nashville with no gig.
Yeah. But Nashville was booming.
It was a very
in that
naive
area.
move on my part, I think. But yeah, Nashville's definitely changed since I lived there in 92. Yeah.
What was your experience as you got here? And
I just felt like pretty much, what am I doing here? I just didn't realize, you really have to be here for years before you're going to start getting called. I think the only job I got here was Jim Rooney was producing Iris DeMint, so I played on her demo for Warner Brothers, I think it was. But I was also on the road with Leon Redbone, so I wasn't around here very much. I never really found my way around here. I'd go on the road with Leon, because he was still touring even though it was winding down. So when I would come back here, I was always getting lost driving around here.
But in one of those kind of kismet situations, being in Nashville led to something very important for you.
Yes, one night my husband went out just to hang out, and happened to meet Pete Finney, Nashville's own Pete Finney, amazing pedal steel, non-pedal steel mandolin player, and they got to talking, and what are you doing here? And well, we moved here, and my wife's looking for a gig, and Pete said, oh, my good friend John Ely plays steel with Asleep at the Wheel, but he's going to be leaving Asleep at the Wheel, and they're coming into town tomorrow to tape Nashville Now. So I decided that, well, I'll just go into the parking lot of the TV studio. I had a little demo pack I had made with a cassette tape and everything, and so went to the TV studio the next day and waited for the bus to pull up. I could see the orange cones where the bus was going to, park, and was really nervous, but knocked on the door, and I said, can I speak to your steel player, John? And he came out, and I said, I hear you're leaving, here's my demo pack, and so they called me, I think, the next day or the day after, but I had taken off to go to Europe with Leon. It took a while, a lot of phone calls and stuff, but eventually I hooked up with Asleep at the Wheel and moved to Austin. So thank you, Pete Finney, for literally changing my life. And for lending me that's Pete Finney's steel guitar, because you can't bring everything you own when you fly. So thanks for that too, Pete.
You only brought all the rest of the instruments.
Yeah.
But Sleep at the Wheel wanted a steel guitar player.
Asleep at the Wheel wanted a steel guitar player, and I was pretty green at that point. I had a steel guitar song on the demo tape, but as Ray Benson, the leader of Asleep at the Wheel, said to me when he called, he said, well, your dobro playing's great, but your steel playing sucks. He said, but you lasted with Leon Redbone for 5 years, and we've been trying out a lot of people, and they're just not fitting in, and I'll give you 6 months. So I had to move to Austin, and literally had 6 months to get up to snuff, because that was an incredible band, and I did not know music theory. I could not read music, and just had to learn a lot at one time. The steel I just dabbled in. So anyway, John Ely, their steel player, they remained in Austin, and I took lessons from him when I was not on the road with the wheel. I took lessons from Herb Remington, Maurice Anderson, and practiced a bunch and stayed.
Great.
For 10 years.
Yeah. For 10 years, it must have worked. So you must have learned and fit in well. So.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. That's a tough instrument too, but after selling a house and giving up everything and moving here to Nashville and then moving to Austin, I just felt like I couldn't turn back at that point. I had really nothing to go back to, so I had to. And I was determined. I love swing music too, so.
How was Austin? How was working with Ray and the band? This is a big band where you had been in small combos.
Yeah, Asleep at the Wheel, for those of you not familiar, is a Western swing band. So it's a very large band doing a combination of swing and jazz and country music. A lot of different components to it. There was a piano, fiddle, saxophone, steel, drums, guitar. So Austin was a great town back in '92. It wasn't as crowded and overgrown as it is now. And there was a lot of live music. It felt like somebody had taken the old Woodstock, New York, and picked it up and moved it into the capital city of Texas. So I loved it, yeah.
Yeah, again, another great time to be in Austin in the '90s. There's so much going on.
It was a good time, yes.
Yeah, so, part of being in Sleep at the Wheel is a lot of people work with them, and they do a lot of records where they have a lot of guests, especially there are a couple of Bob Wills tributes albums, but people hire them to play songs with them, so you get to meet a lot. So got to play with a lot of sort of legendary figures, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson. We mentioned George Strait before. Younger stars like Dwight Yoakam and Marty Stewart you got to meet and play with. So Sleep at the Wheel won a lot of Grammy Awards. I mean, you've got 5, and they weren't all with the Sleep at the Wheel, and Beau Soleil and...
along with this, when I was with the Sleep at the Wheel, yes, I won 5 Grammys with them, and then played on 2 other Grammy-winning records, Time Out of Mind with Bob Dylan, and then Chautang Cajun with the contemporary Cajun group Beausoleil.
Yeah. It's a pretty wide, from Bob Dylan to Beausoleil.
It is.
Shows some versatility.
It definitely is.
Yeah, so and it does speak of the versatility and how you can fit into situations. And
Yeah, I just, I always envied artists who just stuck to one type of music and just were, it was like just part of their blood, got so ingrained in the one thing, and yet I just always loved so much different kind of music. So I think that's why. I think it just, I just got bored always sticking with one thing.
do you remember your first Grammy Awards and what it was like to attend? Because it's different being out in the crowd, I think, than
Yes, because the tour bus broke down right outside of New York City. and at that time when I was with Asleep at the Wheel, we had a very old bus, really decrepit bus. And so I remember Ray, he was crying inside but laughing on the outside, I think, and he was just saying, oh, he was talking to the bus, saying, I promise this is the last long trip I'm going to take you on. So anyway, we got it fixed and made it to New York City, which is, the Grammys were held at Radio City Music Hall at that time. So yes, I remembered that very well because I didn't think we were going to make it.
Yeah, and there weren't many. I think it was a special Grammys where they went to Radio City Music Hall, which presented a lot other, because it was a smaller stage and a different building. And
Yeah, I think the first two Grammy shows that we attended were in New York, and then the rest in LA.
Yeah, great. So, speaking of legends, there's a lot of Texas Playboys, so you got to meet being a part of the Sleep at the Wheel. How was that? How does it feel like they sort of, and how did they accept you playing Western swing? And what
Meeting
were they
the
like?
original Texas Playboys? It was really one of the highlights because, a lot, a few of the remaining members of the Texas Playboys still remain in Texas. Herb Remington, the steel player, Eldon Shamblin, pictured here with Marty Stewart and myself in the studio, incredible guitar player, Johnny Gimbel.
Country Music Hall of Fame member, Johnny
Yes,
Gimbel. Yes.
Leon Roush, the singer. So it was really a thrill. Just to be in a recording studio, and we did some shows with them, but to be with basically living history and hearing their stories of what it was like, to tour way back when and to work with Bob Wills, and I feel very blessed to have met them all.
And Herb Remington in particular is a real pioneer on the steel guitar, and so that specific, connection and getting to meet him, and obviously you must have gotten along pretty well. So.
Oh, I loved Herb Remington. What a sweet man, and I think I mentioned before, maybe took some steel lessons from him, and to be able to play with side by side with Herb Remington. I think the first time was Austin City Limits TV show, and I was a nervous wreck because they set our steels up side by side, and that was in the beginning. But this photo is from many years later, and it was always fun to play with Herb, really. So there was a big hit in the 30s by Leon McAuliffe that played with Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys before Herb Remington, Steel Guitar Rag.
Did you learn? I mean, musicians are always learning, I know. But were there things about Herb Remington you think you picked up on?
Oh yeah, he had such a very jazzy style, and he would show me some stuff once in a while. I took 1 or 2 lessons from him in Houston, but John Ely was constant. I took lessons from him for quite a while, but Herb, whenever we'd get together and play, He would either show me how to make a sound like a cricket or a frog. He was great at that on the steel, or he would show me some little riff or something. But he had a great sense of humor, and went on to build steel guitars, which I have a Remington steel that I couldn't bring, but yeah, that's the steel I usually play.
Yeah, I've seen a picture. I should have put it in here of the headstock that says, made by Herb Remington for Cindy Cashdollar. So it's quite a treasure.
Yes,
so,
it is.
Sometime in this time, you ended up working with Bob Dylan, as you mentioned, on "Time Out of Mind," which is really one of his best records, or most recognized records and loved records of the last 30 years of his career or so. How did that happen? How did you get hired for that?
I think Bob heard me play, or might have seen some old footage or heard old recordings of me playing with John Herald, I was told. So I think that's how I got the phone call to work on Time Out of Mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. Him and John would have been friends from
Yeah.
Greenwich Village, and so sure. What was it like? Talk about the first experience walking in? It was Criteria Studio Miami's, which is a famous studio.
Yeah, Time Out of Mind album was made in a few different studios, but I did the recordings that were at Criteria Studios in Miami, where Bee Gees had recorded, and Aretha Franklin, a lot of people. And so it was a very big, cavernous room, and the record is amazing because it sounds exactly like that room. When I hear Time Out of Mind, which I don't really sit around and listen to a lot of records I worked on, but when I do hear recordings from that, it does sound just like the studio. But it was a very interesting session. It was all done live. There was about 12 musicians, and so really there was no time to sit there and write a chart. Bob would just play the song, and you would just start playing along, and hope that you didn't make a mistake, pretty much. But I found him I loved working with him. Very nice.
So it wasn't a lot of solos or a lot of, hey, Cindy, take it.
No, there were not a lot of solos on Time Out of Mind. I think Bob wanted a very large sound, as did Daniel Lenoir, who produced the record. And so it was all about textures and atmosphere more than solos.
Yeah. And there were other sort of famous musicians with Jim Keltner, Augie Meyer.
Oh, yeah.
Buggy Baxter was a steel guitar
Bucky
player.
Baxter.
Pedal steel good player, and you
Jim
all were
Dickinson on piano, and Brian Blade on drums, and
wow, that's great.
yeah. Duke Robillard on guitar. It's hard to remember Tony Garnier on bass. So many people that were there in the studio at one time.
So what did you play on it?
I played steel and I think lap steel. And I think the track we did, one song that we did that did not end up on Time Out of Mind, it might be on a bootleg. I can't remember the song, but those are the instruments.
And but you have a pedal steel player and you.
And a non.
So how did that fit? Okay, so.
It was okay. I think one day Bucky, Baxter, the other steel player, made a remark. He said, "We sound like swirly bird poop, two steel players playing together." But it came out good.
Who says that's a bad thing? So. And again, as you said, it was another Grammy Award winner for you. And that was also the show that I know you weren't in a band, because you were there as Sleep at the Wheel.
I was there
right?
with Sleep at the Wheel, yeah.
Because they were nominated for an award that night as well.
Yeah.
So, but that was the famous, if you saw it, there's the Soy Bomb show where somebody sort of crashed the stage and came out and danced as Bob and his band were singing.
That was
Love
bizarre
Sick.
to see.
So, yeah.
It's like it's half-naked man dancing on the stage with Soy Bomb written on his chest. And I thought Bob handled it beautifully. He just kind of looked at him and continued on.
Yes. So, did you go back to Sleep at the Wheel? Then I know you played after this record. Did you go back and play with Sleep at the Wheel for a while?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was with the Sleep at the Wheel when I did Time Out of Mind. It's just Ray let me out, to, gave me time off to do a Time Out of Mind.
Yeah, oh, great. Good for him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then we ended up touring with Bob a year later we, Asleep at the Wheel, opened shows for Bob for about a month.
You know, at what point did, from after Dylan, after Sleep at the Wheel, at what point did you decide to leave Sleep at the Wheel?
I left Sleep at the Wheel, I think, in 2001, only because I just wanted to get back to doing other types of music. I mean, I loved Western swing, and I wanted to continue to like it. I was just getting kind of tired of after 10 years of just doing pretty much, the same thing.
A hard touring band too, yes.
And the very touring, relentless touring. Although, after the old broken down bus, after the Grammys I talked about, we did get a nicer bus, so the traveling was
Life's
better.
little luxuries.
Yes, but no, I was just tired of the same music, so I left on very good terms. And I just remember going to Ray's office. We had gotten back from a very grueling tour. And I just said, I'm sorry, but I'm burned out. I can't do this anymore. And he said, well, I'm surprised it took you this long. And so anyway, we remained friends. And I play with them about every year when they need a sub. And actually just did the 50th anniversary tour of Sleep at the Wheel last October. Yeah. We were here. We played it at the Grand Ole Opry. Opryland, not the Ryman, yeah.
Sure. At some point, I know you played, were you afraid as you were leaving Sleep at the Wheel what was going to happen next? Did you have
I
fear?
was scared to death.
Yes.
I mean, I just thought, what are you going to do? Now what? So after I came home, after meeting with Ray that morning, and I just sat at my kitchen table and went through an address book and pulled every business card that everyone had given me and just went through every contact and just started calling people and let them know. And I think Beausoleil, the Cajun man, I called Michael Doucet, and he said, well, we're doing a Prairie Home Companion show, and so why don't you do that with us? And then I started touring with them. And I didn't know Cajun music, but I learned pretty quickly.
At some point, I think one of the albums that you played and toured with was with Ryan Adams and Cold Roses, which is
Ryan Adams. That was I love Ryan. He's a wonderful singer-songwriter, and I think Brad Pemberton might be here. That was the drummer with Ryan when I played. Then, but yes, I was on the double record Cold Roses, and toured with Ryan, and I think he's just one of the best songwriters. I just love his music, and that is when we played Royal Albert Hall. This is years after Cold Roses, but I had done recorded a record with Ryan that Glenn Johns produced, and it was myself and Ben Montench on keyboards from Tom Petty's group, and Don Was, and Jeremy Stacy on drums. And so we recorded the record in LA and then finished and went and played the Royal Albert Hall, which such an incredible theater. It looks like a big Victorian birthday cake. That's what it looked like to me on the inside.
It's such a beautiful place.
So that record, by the way, never came out. Ryan sometimes will record stuff and then shelve it, and so unfortunately it didn't come out.
But your relationship with Ryan was good? Did you feel like he tried?
Yes, I think it was after this too, or was it before or after I did, this is the movie This Is 40. He called me to do a scene in that with him. So 30 Seconds of Stardom. It's a shot of the band playing at the end of the movie.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, Leon Redbone, Van Morrison, Bob Dylan, Ryan Adams. These are not always people who, can be hard on bands or relationships, and you've seemed to have weathered all that pretty well. So.
I guess I have. Yeah, I think so. In some instances, I did leave Ryan after a year because there were just certain things going on that I just couldn't handle. But I don't know, I just think that you do what you can. You do the best you can for as long as you can, and I think everybody I work with, Leon Redbone was not difficult to work with, but he was very quirky. And I think, like I said earlier, all of us that probably work for difficult or quirky people, and I have a pretty high threshold, as you can tell.
Yes, I can tell, yes. Before we leave Texas, there was a great picture of you that you were a part of a Vanity Fair spread where they went around the country and then highlighted country musicians, and on their Texas story and photos, you were one of a pretty heavyweight list of artists that were there, as everybody can see. It's Jimmy Dale Gilmore, Stephen Bruton, the late Stephen Bruton, T-Bone Burnett, Joe Ely, Jesse Coulter, and Cindy Cashdollar. So
That was, well, I love it that Vanity Fair does a music issue every year. So obviously this is a country issue, and that photo was taken, that was August, and that was in front of the Alamo, and we had to wait until it, until it closed. So that was taken at about 6 o'clock, and I think it was about 98 degrees maybe. And there we all are, you can see in vintage Western clothes, gabardine, very heavy. So anyway, it's a great picture. And the morning after that, I remember I went home and packed, and then flew to LA to work with Rod Stewart. That's what I remember from that. Yes.
So again, another
So
name.
I went from there to,
another
180.
big name, and then somebody.
Pinball machine, yeah.
And then somebody who's not known for having dobros or lap steels or anything, but he was a.
Rod had come out at that time, I think it was called A Tribute to the Best Rock Songs of the 80s. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong, but that was the premise of the record, so I was hired basically just we did a lot of TV appearances for a few weeks and did one song that had lap steel on it, so that was that. I wasn't doing, I think I did steel guitar maybe on some songs, dobro on one song.
It was a good experience, though, right?
Yeah, it was great. Rod Stewart still looked good, sounded great.
Yeah, great. At some point you decided to move back from Woodstock from Austin. What brought that about?
In 2013, I reconnected with Harvey Citron, who I had known, not really known, but he was the husband of a good friend of mine that had passed I think in the 80s, and so I knew him, but not really, and we reconnected because I was invited to play with the Les Paul Trio in New York City. This is after Les had passed. So I flew with my steel guitar to Woodstock and took my guitar out of the case to practice for the next day, because the Les Paul Trio always plays on a Monday night at the Iridium. So I opened the steel case, plugged it in, and it didn't work. So that's Sunday afternoon, and the gig is the next day. So I called a friend of mine, and I said, who in Woodstock fixes stuff? I don't know anymore. So Harvey was the only person who called me back. And he's a wonderful luthier. If you get a chance, look up citronguitars.com. He made my lap steel that's here. Anyway, he was the only one that answered my call, so I went over and he did emergency repair. And we reconnected. And so I moved back to Woodstock in 2015. And we got married in 2017.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. And
Thank you. Thank you.
So you can go back home again. Right?
So it was a beautiful way to move back to Woodstock.
Yeah, great. And you played. You immediately went back. I'm thinking of playing in Woodstock. Did that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I it's always back and forth and on the road. But yes, I'm do a lot of studio work in Woodstock. There's a few studios and still a lot of local gigs, and I still tour. I think when I moved back, I was touring with Albert Lee, and for a couple of years, and trying to remember who else, Amy Helm. But yeah, I'm always back and forth. But now Woodstock is the home base instead of Austin.
Great. And then one thing I've noticed, especially in recent years, and by recent I mean 10 or 15, that you do a lot of really great guitar players love to have you on stage with them. I know we have a Sonny Landreth photo as well, and it seems like you get pulled in a lot with other players who are very distinctive in their styles too. So,
I do, and I'm so glad for it because they literally are my favorite guitar players. Albert Lee, I've been a fan of forever, and Sonny Landreth, and actually, Sonny Landreth and I, he's a wonderful slide player, and we do a duo tour every year. So I don't think we're coming to Nashville. We're touring in October, but unfortunately not here. But and Red Volkart is another guitar player who I work with a lot when I was in Texas.
Yeah,
so yeah, I'm very lucky to get to work with a lot of my guitar heroes.
Yeah, Carol in Wonderland was somebody else
Yeah,
who played
Carol
with
in
a lot,
Wonderland,
so,
amazing.
yes. You know, how do you feel now, looking back through everything and seeing all that you've done? You know, and it seems like you've had to fit into so many different situations and adapt to it. What do you see as when you look back and think of your legacy and what you've contributed?
It was really interesting to go back so far for this event because, you know, I had just kept storing all my photos and you know, VHS tapes and everything just in plastic tubs. You know, it's on the someday list. Someday I'm going to organize everything, and never did. So doing this event forced me to look back at everything, and it's really bizarre. It's like, you know, it's like to see what you've done. It's like you're looking backwards and backwards and backwards. So many years to see and think about how you evolved. And what brought you to each stage it's a very strange thing. And I feel so honored to be here, and I thank you for having me, and thank all of you for coming. But it's you know, music is very interesting. You know, it's a small world. You keep meeting the same people again, as we've met in '84. But it's very, even though it's very odd to look back, it's also very exciting to actually see what you've done. I think for a long time I just felt like I was on a hamster wheel and just so busy you don't really stop and think about what you've done to get there. You just keep going. You just keep doing it. You keep practicing. You keep learning songs, and you don't really, at least me, take the time to realize, wow, I did that, you know.
And we've only scratched the surface of some of the people you played with. I'll name a few. Graham Parker. You toured with Dave Alvin and the Guilty Women, which had to be a lot of
guitar
fun.
hero, yes.
Omar and the
Yes,
Howlers.
clap for Dave
Yeah,
Alvin,
Dave
for
Alvin.
sure.
Omar and the Howlers. The great Don Walzer from Texas. If you guys were listening as you were coming in, I know we had a couple Don Walzer songs on the playlist that you gave us, so you were proud of that work. You know, Bill Kirchen, another great guitar player. James Hand, Happy and Artie Traum, who go back to. I know Happy Traum, and he said he knew you since you were a kid, so he goes a long way.
Happy, who actually, along with his brother Artie, were amongst the folk artists that came to Nashville in the '60s to record with the A-team players that were here. Nashville Cats that is here and that you're honoring it was part of what Happy and Artie did long ago.
Yeah, great. So, which all kind of leads to the fact that you have another esteemed guitar player here with you today in John Hall. And for you who don't know John Hall, I said a little bit in the introduction, he was a founding member of Orleans. He helped start the No Nukes tour, and then again, this is just a small summary of all the important things he's done, and then great music he's been a part of. John lived in Nashville for a while in the '80s. I think he's now a Nashville resident again, and we're proud to have him here. And he's also probably, I think, I'm pretty certain in saying he's the first former U.S. House of Representatives member to play guitar in a Nashville Cats program. So I think I'm safe in saying that.
So for all you guitar players out there, this is in open D tuning. John Hall, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thanks.